Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing again. Believe in a power greater than what you are going through. When you don't know what to do, keep breathing.
That's right. Keep breathing. Coming to you live from LA, the City of Angels, and from New York City, the Big Apple. I'm Dave Nassani, and you are on the Caregiver Dave Show at caregiverdave.com, and I'm with my lovely co-host, Adrienne Gruberg of thecaregiverspace.org. Say hello, Adrienne.
Hello, Adrienne. Sometimes I
Yes.
have to do that. I'm sorry.
Say
I love
hello.
that
Say goodnight,
era.
Daisy. Okay. So we are proud to be voted #1 caregiving podcast of the top 50 on Player FM and the top 6 podcasts on caring.com and a whole bunch more, which I lost my script, so I can't tell you what exactly they're for.
Where
FeedSpot.
are you?
We're #1 caregiver podcast on thousands of caregiver podcasts on FeedSpot. I think that's right.
Yes.
And I am in a hotel, so that's why I'm a little out of water, like a fish out of water. I don't have my computer. I don't have my microphone. I don't have me standing behind me in Times Square on the jumbotron. And
No,
but
you've got.
I think we're gonna make it. And now we have an exciting show planned for you. It is Ann Louden. And let me tell you a little bit about Ann. She's pretty amazing. She's an author of an upcoming book, Connection is a Superpower, How Social Courage Gives You the Edge in Life and Love. What a great title. And I'm excited to start the show. I just want to
agree.
I want to thank my last week's guest, James Beard. And just a reminder, you can listen to that podcast, videocast, and all of them, including this one, on my membership website, caregiverdave.com, or on all those other platforms that we're on, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Blog Talk Radio, etc. I'm not going to list them all here because I'm just not going to, because there are just too many.
You can do them on
So,
a crawl from now on. You can
Say it
do them
again?
on a video. You can do them on a video crawl.
A video crawl. I guess you'll have to explain to me what a video crawl is.
Okay.
Because I'm not that tech savvy.
Okay.
I'm a good faker. So, Ann, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dave and Adrienne. Nice to talk with you as well. We're in the same city.
Yeah, I think you're on the upper east side.
That's correct. But we can meet in the middle for coffee.
Yeah, we could.
Sorry, Dave. We're not going to include you.
Well, he'll be here April 23rd.
That's right.
I'm sure Lisa is going to want to do lunch or something when I'm in New York for April during the summit. So let's just start planning for that right now.
Yeah.
So, Ann, why? I like to ask my guests, just who the heck is Ann Louden, and why was she placed on this earth?
Well, that's a two-parter, Dave. I think the first answer
It is.
Yeah, okay. So part A, who is Ann Louden? She is a Tennessean turned Texan, turned after 30 years to New York, to be a new New Yorker. And I think now I know why I was placed on this earth. If you'd asked me at different decades of my life, I wouldn't have known. But now I'm pretty convinced that I am supposed to be an example to other people. It's the life that we can best lead is to figure out what our purpose is. And I've always wanted to leave a legacy. That's been important to me. I went through cancer about 13 years ago and realized, although devastatingly difficult, that there was, on the other side of it, there was a way to help other people. And so what motivates me is that. That is what I'm doing here, and that's what I hope to continue doing as long as I'm on the earth, Dave.
Yes, and I believe every single human being on the earth needs to leave a legacy because they were put here for a reason. And these people that are just wasting their lives and don't realize that their life has purpose, I don't know. I just want to slap them. Well, let's get to our questions.
Well, let's hope that's not your purpose to slap everybody, because there are a lot of people like that.
It might be. I mean, you never know.
Slap them
But
upside the head. Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
do a.
I do think, just one more point on that, I do think that we don't really know what we're here for until we have some perspective. And the challenges
That's
in our
true.
lives, the challenges that we go through are what teaches us perspective. This book that I'm writing, I couldn't have written 20 years ago, and probably not even 10 years ago, because I've been through more each decade that has taught me, if I can be resilient in getting through some of those challenges, that I can understand better how to help other people.
Yeah, and it might take, in your 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s to find out what that destiny and purpose is. But at least you should be looking for it. You say, what am I here for? Where's my niche? What am I passionate about? Where are my gifts, and so on. So I agree. So
Well,
I want to ask you.
on the. Sorry, I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say, I think I'm on the right conversation here, because I'm totally in agreement with you. I like that you emphasize that we are asking
Good.
that question every day. We should be.
We should be.
Well, I'm glad that the three of us do have a legacy that we are
Hmm.
leaving to the world when we do decide, as if we have a decision, but when God decides that it's time for us to leave. So, what are the three most important skills? No, wait. Before that, I want to ask a question, because a lot of caregivers maybe don't even know what the heck we're talking about.
Right.
So, what should caregivers care about the power of connection? That's kind of
Oh,
uh, a mysterious line that I just said, and maybe you can explain a little bit in English.
This is the only language I speak, so we're going to be limited to English here. But I do think a definition of connection is warranted, and then we can talk about why caregivers would care. So, in my terminology, connection is about building intentional relationships and then honoring them. So we are born into a family that we're connected to, and that is a blood relationship. But most of our lives we spend outside that family, in work, in building friendships, in building other kinds of relationships that facilitate our living. It can be something as casual as getting to know the person that is in the case of Adrian and me, we live in the big city, so we have to get to know people in our buildings. If you lived in a rural area, you'd want to have a relationship with people that could help you do whatever your work was, and you'd be thinking about who those people are and how they could be helpful to you. So it's all about, we have to have relationships. We're wired for connection. We're not meant to be isolated. We can't go through life alone. But it is, how intentional are we about making our world bigger by building those relationships? And then once we have them, how do we invest in them? Because you can meet people one time and never see them again. Or if it's important to you to maintain those relationships, you can meet people and then keep them in your lives. It takes work and energy, but there's so much benefit that comes from being connected and caring about those people in your lives.
Yeah,
So why should caregivers care? Do you want me to move on to that, or we can still talk
go
about
ahead.
what connection is?
Yeah.
Well, caregiving is an extremely isolating experience. From the time that you invest in getting a diagnosis, which is only half of caregiving, let's just even say it's 10%. Once you know what you're dealing with, whether it's dementia or some physical ailment or combination of those two things, and what you're facing medically, that's the first part. But the second part is dealing with the illness, not dealing with the diagnosis, and they're very different. And dealing with the illness and the day-to-day routine, and it's in some respects the drudgery of that day-to-day routine, where you're very much alone often as a sole caregiver, it can isolate you from the rest of the world. And the lack of connection, support, encouragement from those that are around you will diminish your living. It'll diminish your caregiving skills. It'll diminish your coping skills. And so if caregivers can nurture this pattern of being connectors, they can lessen the pain of the caregiving experience. And there's joy in caregiving. I don't mean to diminish that either.
of course.
But we all know that caregiving can absolutely damage the health of the caregivers. It can shorten their lives. It can bring on health issues they weren't exposed to previously. There's so many downsides to what the caregiver experiences that they and we must find a way to replenish. And connection is one of those replenishment techniques.
I'd like to interject for a second. Caregivers very often will turn away from a lot of the people in their lives.
Yeah, isolate them.
They'll isolate themselves out of choice, eventually out of choice. But to start with, everybody will say, well, I'll be here whatever you need, I'm here for you. And when they're not there, it's because you haven't kept that connection going.
Well, and you're so right. It's very similar to my experience with cancer. People would say things to me like, "Whenever you need me, call me."
Exactly.
And it's the lack of anticipatory. How can I help? Or let me just show up and bring groceries, or let me get you out of here and take you to the movie. Whatever it is, it's very difficult for people to know what to do in situations of crisis, like a death, or like an illness, or some other big challenge in life. And if we have those strong, cared for connections, then the chances of those people being more quick to respond to us is far greater. And it is this, you said it so well, Adrienne, that the idea of being a caregiver sometimes is synonymous with the sense of, I've got this enormous responsibility now. I'm going to have to step away from the world and execute it. And really the truth is the flip side of that. I need the world to help me execute this. I can't do it alone.
Yeah, so many people are so flippant in the way they say, hey, yeah, we'll get together sometime. Oh, yeah, call me. And the other person kind of knows that you're not really serious, or it's like, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. It's just an automatic response. But caregivers really need to take these people at their word and say, oh, really? Okay, can I call you tomorrow? Pin them down. Or say, hey, if you need anything at the supermarket, let me know. Oh, actually, I do need something.
Be
next
ready.
Next time you're there, can you pick up some lettuce or cold cuts or something? Because caregivers don't want to ask for help for whatever reason. They don't want to be a burden on the person. They think that they don't really want to help. They, whatever's in your mind. I mean, I cut my finger one time because I didn't want to ask somebody to help hold the other end of the molding with the skill saw. And I'm the caregiver's caregiver. If I can't even ask for help, what hope do caregivers have?
There's some shame in asking for help. And
I can't do it by myself.
I can't
Please
do it
help.
by myself. Well, excuse me. No, you can't do it by yourself.
Well, and you think of the examples.
Yeah, well, they're in denial about that.
Yeah.
Totally. And if you think of the examples of times that you've been given help and how much you want to reciprocate, the closest relationships that we have to us where there's this give and take, there's this, you do this thing and I'll do this thing, and it becomes this lovely dance. If you don't have the relationships close to you to be able to access, then you really do feel isolated. The other thing about the caregiving experience that's probably true in every single situation is that you're entering a world you have no idea how to navigate. You're learning as you're going, and you're so absorbed and so exhausted with the process, there's kind of not room for anything else. So if somebody's not standing close to you to help you with that, it requires so much effort to be able to find that person on the outside to provide the assistance that you need. So there's shame. There's also this issue, as you said, of, I can handle it by myself, and the false sense of security of I've got this, when potentially you really don't have it, and being able to admit that is what causes people to disengage from others around them.
Yeah, and another reason why people maybe don't want to ask for help, they don't want to be indebted. They say, okay, now I owe him, and I'm so overwhelmed, there's no way I can repay him for even going to the supermarket for it, and I don't want this to be a one-sided, they'll just talk themselves out of it.
Exactly. That's such an interesting point. I once met a person who was so disengaged with the world, and someone that speaks about loyalty and how we're wired for loyalty. Our brains are wired to be loyal and to trust others. But he himself didn't want to have any connections to the world. He wouldn't want to do a favor for someone, as you say, for the very reason he felt that, he would be, or accept a favor because he'd be obligated to provide the favor. That's not a connection attitude. A connection attitude is, I give willingly and then I'll get back willingly. But you give from your heart, you give because you want to, and then what comes back to you is the grace of investing in that relationship.
Yeah. So what are the 3 most important skills of communication?
Well, there's so many skills of connectors and how they communicate. I'll pick my top.
That's why
3.
I asked the top 3 only, or we could be here all day.
Top 3. The first one is being open to the possibility. So, as an example, when I moved from Texas to New York without knowing how this was going to go in terms of the transition and the culture shock of it, I approached it as an adventure. I didn't know who I was going to meet, and I didn't know what life was going to be like, but I was open to the possibility that it could be different and it could be even better. And so that gave me the mental attitude of being willing to connect with people that I didn't know and building friendships with them. So the first is being open, having a joyous attitude to the possibility that life brings you something good if you are willing to accept whatever the universe brings you. The second skill set is not being cynical. And what that means is not presupposing that you know the answer, that, that person can't help me, or that person doesn't know anything, or, that person's not someone I'm going to enjoy. You don't know until you really have the experience of engaging one-to-one. So being open to possibility, not being cynical. And then the third, which is
That's a hard one, by the way.
Not being cynical. Sort of the older we get, we've seen it all. But the truth is that as you go to new experiences, and maybe when I made this transition to New York, it solidified for me this point of view that I do think is accurate. No matter your age, when you change your environment or something in your environment changes you, if you aren't open to the possibilities, you'll be more closed than you were before you made the change. If you come to something new with a sense of, I've seen it, I've done it, I don't care to know more, you won't know more. But if you go through a change and you think, what could come of this that I hadn't anticipated, that I can't see, somebody else can take my hand and show me the way, you're going to have a lot more opportunity in your life to live in a bigger way. And so not being cynical is number 2, and number 3, which goes along to being open to the possibility, is having a sense of natural curiosity, asking yourself the question, I wonder why that person thinks this. I wonder what this means. I wonder what I could learn if. And having that attitude in cooperation with the first 2 points is the exact mindset you need to become a connector. It's this, I don't have an agenda. I don't really know what's going to happen next, but I'm open to the chance that something great could happen. And I have to believe the positive. I'm not going to go with it's probably not going to be. I'm going to go with, it possibly could be.
Yeah. Caregivers are not very positive. They're cynical, they're negative, and you hit the nail on the head. Well, listen, let's take a break really fast. We'll be right back.
Our featured speaker is a best-selling author who has written numerous books and articles. He's a speaker, life coach, and host of Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver radio program. He frequently appears on television and radio shows all across the country and has even shared the stage with Suzanne Summers at Harvard. But his most important role is caregiver to his beautiful wife, Charlene, for over 22 years. Please welcome Mr. Dave Nasani!
I want to share with you a love story. In a couple of weeks, my wife and I will be celebrating 44 years of being together. My wife, Charlene, and I had a fairy tale, storybook romance, courtship, and marriage for the first 21 years of our lives together. One day, out of nowhere, my wife has a headache, the headache of her life. She suffered a massive stroke, and it left her severely speech impaired and paralyzed on the right side. And in that moment, our world turned turned upside down. I gotta tell you, the next 2 years was like a living hell. I just didn't know what to do. I felt guilty most of the time. I became a caregiver. I didn't even know what a caregiver was. I was experiencing the same problems that other caregivers experience.
If you don't take care of you, I can't take care of her.
Well, that's why I wrote the book. Now I can teach other caregivers. I'm living proof that you can thrive as a caregiver. My wife and I travel now all over the world sharing our story. One day, life is going to call upon you to be the captain of your boat. Heck, you might be saving your own life. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Caregiver Dave Show, and I'm with Adrian Gruberg, my co-host, and Ann Louden, my wonderful guest. So, Ann, let's talk about, our audience is burned out caregivers, and you are a caregiver too. Tell us about your caregiver experience.
Well, I've had two significant caregiving experiences, both very different. The first was my immediate family, and that was my mother, who had, at a fairly young age, in her, what I say young, in her early 70s, had a stroke. And in the process of this diagnosis and follow-up care and need to move her out of her environment, she was a widow at the time, my family, my sisters and I learned that she was also a hoarder. We had not known it, and it sounds impossible that you don't know those things, but when you're kept out of a physical space, so you can't see what's happening, and you can see the pattern, but you don't really know the extent of it,
Right.
Then the shock of the knowledge of what do you do first with all the things, and how do you sort through them and manage with a person who's also now got a physical condition and then shortly thereon had dementia. How do you go through all that? And it was a huge learning curve for my sisters and for me to get my mother moved to a different place. We had 7 of those industrial garbage bins that got backed up to the home that I lived in. Containers, thank you for the correct word. And having to get items that were both mundane and important, but had no place in the home anymore, that had to be disposed of. And so that was a very, very tricky part. And my mother survived through another stroke and through then descending medical health quality for another 6 years. So there was a really long period of time where we were managing all of these things. And I say we because my sisters and I were doing this together, and one of my sisters was the day-to-day caregiver. And one of the things that I'll say
was your mother with her?
Yeah, eventually she was. That's what we had to do, move her from one state to the next. And so in the process, one of the shocking aspects for me about this, because I was the helper, but I didn't live in the same community. My sister ended up being in the same community. Was that when my mother died, my sister went through a deep depression because her days had been defined by caring for my mother, and even though that the absence of this experience
that's common,
meant that her
Very
life
common.
Was, her life was different, but it was absolutely grueling for her to then find the purpose in her life. The other experience that I had was more unusual, not typical, not immediate family. I had known, and when I was living in Texas and working in the university environment, I got to meet many of the university graduates and became close to them, particularly those that were older than I was, decades older. I was a much younger woman at the time. And I got acquainted with a woman who was at celebrating her 50th reunion from this university, and I was organizing it, and we got to be good friends. And she was a personality. She loved everything blue. She had a blue car. She had a blue front door. She wore only blue. She wore only blue clothes. She only had blue furniture in her lovely home. She had only blue flowers in her garden. And this made her a unique and spunky, wonderful kind of woman. And so I had this long 10-year relationship with her, and because she had no children, she began to think of me as her granddaughter. And then enter her brother and his wife, who wanted to claim some of her financial resources. So they took her to a doctor. He declared her to have early onset dementia. And so they decided they were going to propose guardianship. And when it became actually a trial heard by a judge, because it was premature that they could have claimed guardianship, and it would have been for less good purposes, honestly. So the judge appointed me as her guardian because I was supposedly the neutral person. Now I'm no family connection to her. I know very little about her life, and yet I'm now tasked with the responsibility of sorting through all of her blue things and moving her from her home that she had lived in for 40 years into an assisted living facility.
That was blue. I
had to furnish it, and I worked really hard on the blue. And I have to tell you, one of the funniest stories about this was I thought I was getting it all exactly right. I had her stay with a neighbor for the day. I get the moving truck. We sort through things. We sell things. This is premature to the move date. And then I get her to this beautiful place and think I've done a fantastic job. In her bedroom, which was the bedroom in the house, there was a framed photo of a young woman, and I assumed it to be a family member. So I take that framed photo and I put it in the new bedroom on her dresser, and I stock the fridge, and I put a dozen roses on the kitchen table, and at the end of the day, I'm exhausted, but I bring her back with the neighbor, and she comes in, she looks all around, and she says, "Oh my gosh, this is beautiful." And then she goes into her bedroom, and she says, "But Anne, I don't know, who's the picture? What's that picture on my dresser? Who is that?" I said, "I don't know. I thought you know who it was." She said, "No, that's just a picture frame." It was a stock art photo.
Oh, God.
That I thought she had treasured. And I had moved it. Yeah. Oh, my gosh. I couldn't believe it. It was a sepia tone, a woman that looked like she had been born in the 20s or 30s. And so anyway, that was my experience then. And then Vera spiraled downward over a period of about 6 years with the dementia and with her physical challenges. And eventually I was moved out of the guardianship role, and the neighbor became the guardian. But I had to accommodate my personal life, working life, to a person that I had known socially, but not in any way. I remember going through her lingerie drawer thinking, this is extremely personal. I'm having to figure out what I can take and what I shouldn't take. It was a bizarre, challenging experience for me to play that role, but I learned a lot from it. So those are my two: my mother, and then Vera, the blue lover.
Yeah. Well, like you said, it's so common to get depressed after caregiving that Adrian actually has a caregiver group called Aftercare Support Group. So communion skills, some people have them, some people don't, some people are rotten at them. How do you cultivate them, and what do you do if they don't come naturally to a person? You just give up?
Oh, no, of course, never give up in anything, I think. But one of the quick conclusions people draw is that, I'm not an extrovert, and extroverts must be good at this. If I'm an introvert and I need to replenish myself, I do it in solitude. I process.
So better. Help me. That's me.
That's you? You don't sound.
Me too.
No. Well, I think
we've managed to act like extroverts, even though we're not extroverts.
Well, I do believe that we have to know who we are with respect to our personalities. Do we like to function in a big group and walk in and know no one and get acquainted in that way, or do we like this sort of one-on-one relationship? And which is just know what it is, whichever it is. And if you're the introvert, and I was for years until my job and my work, and I've been in the world of philanthropy and raising money for nonprofits all my career, so I'm interested in the idea of what makes philanthropist connectors, or how they get engaged first in your cause. But having said that, I was introverted forever, and I found that what gave me joy was getting to know people at a deep level, one-to-one. And those connections are as valuable, in fact, probably more important than large groups of social acquaintances, which are what extroverts create. So you may have the advantage there. So if it doesn't come naturally for you to build relationships, that I ask you to do a little brief assessment in your mind. Ask yourself, who are the five most important people in your life? And I don't know how this will turn out for you, but whatever
All right.
the answer. Okay, so if you know who those five most important people are, then are they family, or are they people you wouldn't have known but for what? But for blank. And so I kind of call it my connection timeline when I've asked myself this question. If I hadn't done this thing, I wouldn't have met this person. And if I didn't know this person, this good thing in my life wouldn't have happened. I love tracing that back because it really can tell you who you've come to value and how you've gotten to know them. And I'd be willing
and
to
it wouldn't
bet.
have happened if you were being shy and introverted.
Right. And I'd be willing to bet at least one of your five, maybe more than that, would be people that you met, what I would say, like over the transom. You met somebody that you would not have known, whether it's a doctor or somebody else in the medical field that helped you, or it was a neighbor, or it was someone that you met through another person, and that was a life changer for you. And so there is great value. In my own life, I can trace the work that I've gotten, the people that I've spent time with in a crisis, those that have shared similar interests. They were all people that I wouldn't necessarily have known if I had made some effort. Or maybe we both made an effort, but then I had responsibility for for moving that forward. And I'm adventuresome enough, if I can move from Texas to New York this time in my life, that I say always, what if? And maybe I wouldn't have said that before I had cancer, but the medical challenges in my life have given me the sense of the importance of living life every day. I think you said that at the very beginning of the conversation, Dave. But if we're not asking ourselves every day what we're doing, then we're not getting full impact from our lives. And so I know that connection brings joy. I know that connection brings a sense of arms around me. I know that it's changed my life. And I'm compelled to be able to teach these skills to others so that they can learn how to find more satisfaction in their lives. In particular, I'm interested in the fact that our younger generation, my daughter's 22, hide behind technology and think it's connection. Yep. Whether it's texting versus picking up the phone, it's a huge problem. Whether it's social media, I'm not saying those don't have value. I think that they do, and I certainly use them. But on the other hand, supplants the face-to-face, then you will feel very disconnected over time.
Yeah. Well, listen, we're going to take another break because it's time. So we'll be right back. Don't go away.
Dave Nasani, the Caregiver's Caregiver, has just released his 6th book entitled It's My Life Too. Reclaim your caregiver sanity by learning when to say yes and when to say no. It was specifically written for caregivers who know they should be putting their needs first, but just don't know how. Dave is the sole caregiver to his wife, Charlene, since 1996. He knows firsthand what caregivers are going through, because he is one. And he now speaks all across the country, offering caregivers his incredible caregiver support package. Even the airlines tell us that in the event of an emergency, to put your oxygen mask on first, before you help your child with their mask. They know that those who don't heed their advice often black out, thus becoming unable to help either themselves or their child. And caregivers are exactly the same way. It's My Life Too. Reclaim your caregiver sanity by learning when to say yes and when to say no. Will help caregivers who are neglecting their sleep, diet, and social life, and learn to put their needs first. Pick up your copy today, or buy one for your special caregiver. On sale everywhere, and at caregiverscaregiver.com.
And we're back with the Caregiver Dave Show. My guest, Ann Louden, and my co-host, Adrian Gruberg. I'm Dave Nasani at caregiverdave.com. And I wanted to ask you, being a caregiver is a double-edged sword. It can be a real blessing, and it can be a real curse. And some of the stories that Adrian and I hear on our Facebook pages are just, oh my God,
horrendous.
And we're professional counselors. It should take a lot to shock us, right? Hear the story about the counselor who hears this story and he tries not to act shocked, and many times it's the case with us. We try not to be shocked, but we are.
Have no answers.
Tell, yeah, and
And
not easy answers anyway.
right.
You know, you got the pat answers and the cliche answers, but
Yeah.
I think they do more harm than good. So
Yep.
sometimes you got to say, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to respond to that." You know, and at least they say, "Oh, good. Well, then it's not me. I'm not crazy because I don't know what to say about it either." You know, and you've got at least someone uh, sharing with you that you're not crazy. But what would you say is your most important thing that you've learned from caregiving? Because it is really a life-changing experience, which means it's a good thing. But it's hard to see the good while you're in the midst of the storm.
Oh, absolutely. I think the most important skill set for caregiving and for living is staying in the present moment, which
Hmm.
means that you're not reflecting on
Worry
the
about
mistakes you made in the
tomorrow.
past,
Quit
and you're
worrying
not
about yesterday.
fretting about tomorrow, because if you're spending, it takes an extraordinary amount of energy to be a caregiver. It takes an extraordinary amount of energy to worry, and it's wasted energy because there's much you can't change. So the difference between planning, anticipating, organizing, and worrying, first three are proactive, and the last one is a negative, because worrying is just anxiety sort of spinning around over and over again. Being thoughtful, proactive, planning, and being resourceful, those are skill sets that advance what we need to accomplish. So I remember when I'm thinking about, both the caregiving experience and the cancer experience, which seem aligned in my head, at least for the lessons learned, is that the more I could be in the moment, with Vera, with the day that I thought I had found this or cherished this wonderful image of someone that was in her family that
Hmm.
she loved, and put it on her dresser, and then she challenges me about it, and all I could do was really laugh. It was a funny moment, and I was going to beat myself up about that step that I'd taken. And I remember my mother she would buy, because she was a hoarder, she would buy not one of something, she'd buy
Hmm.
10 of the same thing. It might
Right.
be 10 Kleenex boxes that all look the same, or 10, plastic trash bins, or, 10 uh, trash bags. She was obsessed with trash, which is kind of funny because she had lots of trash she accumulated. But and so instead of getting ahead of that, what my sister and I would do would be to be amused by it, because there was really nothing else that we could do that would make that moment feel lighter. And so that, I guess maybe that's a phrase I should think about as we think about, if you stay present, the whole moment is lighter. It doesn't carry the burden of the past, and it doesn't carry the frustration of the past, and doesn't carry the burden of the future. So the staying present is also something it's allowed me to take greater risks, thinking that, okay, could I have moved to New York? Could I have afforded it? Where was I going to live? Who was I going to meet? What was I going to do? And with that attitude, I could have talked myself out of it. But
Easily. Yeah.
with the attitude of staying present, I thought, I can just do this, and I'll figure it out one day at a time. I am very much a planner, but being able to be in that moment gave me much greater joy, and gives me much greater joy. Just like talking to you two, I'm not thinking about anybody else and anything else. I'm thinking about being in this moment, talking to both of you.
I
Yeah.
don't need to see the fire.
So let me ask you something. Let's talk about your book. You're interviewing for your book.
I
Um,
am.
who exactly are you interviewing?
Well, let me tell you that the people I interview have to meet 4 criteria, or I don't really want to talk to them. And I like to talk to everybody, so this is a serious kind of delineation for what I need. So I'm interviewing, I originally said 15 people, but I think it's going to end up being more like 20, because the more people I interview, the more they suggest someone else I should interview. But back to the
Ah.
criteria. The first is that they have to be highly successful in their industry, whatever that industry might be. And I have people that are in entertainment. I have people that are in the business world. I have people that are clergy. I have individuals that are in the nonprofit community. I have athletes. So I'll get into that in a minute. But they have to be highly successful, because that suggests to me that they've gone through their career path in an upward fashion, and that obviously we're assuming that they've learned something in that process. So that's number one. Number two, they need to be well known. I'm not being a snob about that, but if they are well known in their industry, and I've got a couple aspirational interviews that are well known nationally, then if I can shine a spotlight on them as super connectors, as connection heroes, their story is more interesting to everyone else. So they've already got their own collection they've already got their own world, and they've got people around them that have celebrated their success. But now that we point out this particular characteristic that they have of being a connector, and then all of a sudden we can illustrate what connection really means. The third thing that they need to do is they have to meet my list of the 10 attributes of a connector, and I will admit I made the list up, but these are 10 things, I only shared 3 of them with you earlier, that I believe are key to being a successful connector. So again, they have to be successful, well-known, and a connector. And the fourth is the most important. They have to be using those connection skills to change and save lives. And that, to me, can mean philanthropy. It can mean giving charitably to a cause. It can mean advancing other people's causes. It can mean developing talent. Whatever it is in their world, they have to be proactive in doing something with those connection skills that is a story worth telling and illustrates the points of what I'm trying to say, or teachable skill sets for connection in a world of what I believe is increasing disconnection. So, who have I interviewed, or who am I interviewing? Well, I'll just give you a handful. I'll just tell you 3 for now. I'm interviewing a priest in Chicago who is a papal appointee. So the Pope singled him out as the person who runs Catholic Extension around the country. And Catholic Extension is a community-based set of resources and activities, and focused primarily in indigent parishes. So in this case, there are communities where everybody's below the poverty line, 157 communities in the country, and the only form of connection they have is through the church. So the priest that I'm interviewing has this important role of being the connector nationally to so many people who wouldn't have an advantage or help or assistance in the right way without it. The second person that I want to mention is a woman who is the inspiration for a Broadway show, and Adrienne, maybe you've seen it. It's called Come From Away. It's the story of one of the first female pilots that American Airlines ever hired, and she led a squadron of 20-plus planes on 9/11 from New York, away from New York airspace to Gander, Newfoundland, when planes could not land in New York. Right. And there were 7,000 people landed in a town of 2,000 people, and were there for a week, and the town had to completely change their way of living and being to accommodate all these strangers who'd come from away. And so this is a story of Beverly Bass, who was that pilot who led the planes into this community. It's a phenomenal story of redemption and connection, and how people, strangers, can open their arms and their hearts to those that they don't know.
My cousin was one of those people.
Was she? She was in Gander?
No, it was a he.
Oh, she was on the,
he was one of the 7,000s. He was one of the invaders.
Oh my gosh, that's a great connection story. Offline, we need to talk about that, because I need to introduce him. See, this is a connection move. I had to introduce him to her, and she may well know him. Yeah. But so she's now written a book called The Sky and Me, which is for little girls who aspire to be female pilots. And she's done the show's opening around the world, and it's a big hit here in New York. And so I'd love the chance to talk to her. And another person that I interviewed is a woman who's one of the 4 vice chairs at Morgan Stanley. She is in charge of diversity in the company of 57,000 people. And she's also a gospel singer. And I got to see her at the Apollo Theater at Christmas time. And she's phenomenal. And she said to me when we met, I think I'm a connector. She came from nothing in Florida. She had no money. She worked her way up the education ladder. She graduated from Harvard, international speaker. She's written 2 books herself. And she is she said, I don't know that I'm as much of a connector as you are. Maybe I need to learn some things. I've not thought about this the way you think about it. And I said, well, when you sit on an airplane, what percentage of the time do you talk to people around you? She said, oh, maybe 30%. I said, why is that? And she said, because I probably don't want to invest enough of myself in the possibility, but now I think I'm going to. So it's been really fascinating. I've had some fantastic conversations. I'm going to L.A. That's why I'm coming to L.A., Dave, in 2 weeks to interview some more people in L.A. I'm going where they are and having the conversations with the people that I think are these super connectors, because it's important for me to sit in front of them. So
I want to ask you a question about that hesitancy to talk to the people on the airplane. It mirrors the experience of, well, I want to get to know this person, and I'll do this and this and this and this, but what if that doesn't do it? I'll feel that I expended this energy trying to get to know this person, and I invested myself, and I've been rejected. Well, there are lots of people who won't talk to you on an airplane, They pretend they're sleeping. They anything
That's
not
right.
to
They hide
talk.
behind them. Exactly. However, first of all, if you have something, sorry, Dave. Did you?
No, I said, imagine that.
Oh yeah, imagine that. Well, you may have something that keeps you from talking to somebody on an airplane. I'm not suggesting every flight you take you talk to someone, but I will say you're in a plane and you're not going anywhere, and that time is a time committed to flying. And so if you've lost something, if you've lost anything, all you've lost is the flight.
Right.
All you've lost is the time on the flight, which you could have put to different use. But I can give you 5 examples, I won't right now, of people that I've met on airplanes, and those are, at least 3 of the 5, are friendships that exist today, still exist today, and made things possible for me that I would never have dreamed. And so it's again, it's what I said earlier, it's being open to the possibility. And a plane's not the only place. In New York, people have their heads down, so they don't necessarily engage in conversation. But I recently went to a book talk here with an author who, as it turns out, lives in my building. There's 750 people in my building, so I would have probably never seen her on the elevator. But since that time, I've met her and her husband in their apartment on 14 floors above me for a conversation that'll continue on. We'll be great friends. And so
great.
It's wonderful. If we hadn't had that opportunity to make that connection, that we both live in the same place, maybe it wouldn't have happened. I'm just always glad for the adventure of meeting somebody else, meeting somebody new.
Yeah, you encouraged me. We're open now as
I'm
well.
open.
You certainly have learned a lot from these interviews, and I can't believe the time is gone. It goes so fast when you're having fun. How do we contact you if people want to, buy your book? When will it be out? And
well, the book should be out I hope at the end of 2020. But let me give you my website. It's www.Louden LOUDEN.com. And I'll tell you a quick commercial. On the top of the speaking page, which is on my website, is a 10-minute video. It's unrehearsed, actually. I don't know how I managed to get through that, but it is a story of connection, a magical story of connection that happened to me when I moved to New York, and it'll take you 10 minutes to watch it. So if you want to think about that. So thank you for having me. This has been a wonderful conversation. I wish you the best of the.
It was delightful.
This year. Thank you so much. And Adrian,
I'm very glad we made this connection. Yes.
Me too. I was going to say, Adrian, we have no excuse. We live in the same place.
No, we'll have to get in touch and make a difference in each other's lives.
I would love that. Yeah. I would love that. Well, thank you.
And to contact me, it's Adrian at thecaregiverspace.org.
Okay, and fantastic.
Yep.
All right, and I'm at caregiverdave.com. Everything is right there. So thank you again, and we'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Wonderful. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing again. Keep breathing, take it in and let it out. Keep breathing, it's gone.